The Free Palestine protesters were blocking the Philly Pride Parade. I don't know if you saw this. This 33 million views is like the most views I've seen on a tweet in a while. But
so these are the Palestine protesters here.
This is the Philly Pride Parade.
Oh no, the Palestine people are on the other side.
And then these are the Palestine people.
Oh, okay. No pride in genocide, it says.
Now, real quick, assuming that this guy is gay, which there's nothing in his outfit that would indicate that, he would not do well under the Hamas regime. Let's be real about that. But
yeah,
I think the interesting thing is it shows the limits of the intersectional framework, so to speak, where if you just measure, well, who's correct, who's not, based on who's being oppressed more, you're going to run into contradictions like these.
yes.
Do you have any thoughts as the arch gay of
well, I mean, I do. Well, it is interesting because like there's definitely a sort of atmosphere of like hierarchy enforcement that seems to be happening on the left in terms of like which causes matter more than other causes. And I've even seen, some sort of center left people complain about this, the idea of sort of like the Palestinian cause as being the cause that sort of eats everything else, right? Like nothing, you're not allowed to talk about anything else, because if you talk about anything else, you're distracting from the plight of the Palestinian people, and then you deserve to be sort of shamed and humiliated and mocked for that. And so I think that what you're showing me here is just a kind of physical manifestation of that effort to assert a hierarchy of causes, right? The pride is sort of now seen as frivolous because it's not explicitly about the plight of the Palestinian people, and the no pride in genocide, that banner that guy was holding up with all the bloody handprints on it, sort of implying that in some ways there's even like guilt or complicity in sort of what Israel's doing if you're just holding a pride parade. Like it seems a little
yeah. Well, and this is not even in Israel. This is in Philadelphia. This is not in Israel.
Yeah, I know exactly. Well, I mean, that's exactly the point.
If it was in Israel, I'd be much more sympathetic to the this side of things. Although, I guess it is interesting because it's like, it certainly is the case that the issue in Palestine, the ethnic cleansing, I think it's uncontroversial to call it that. Whether or not it rises to the level of genocide, that's I don't think
beyond your pay grade.
Well, it's certainly beyond my pay grade, and I think it's beyond anyone's pay grade because words don't mean nearly as much as they used to nowadays. But certainly, what's going on is disgusting and immoral, in my opinion. And I think Netanyahu deserves to be arrested. Arrest warrants are being sought by the ICC, I believe, which is different from the ICJ. There's two bodies, and there's a distinction there. But the International Criminal Court, I believe, is seeking arrest warrants for Netanyahu, and I think that's warranted, no pun intended.
And Hamas as well.
And Hamas as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because, like you said, the Palestinian cause seems to be taking up most of the space in left-wing circles. I would say rightfully so. If we're going to steelman the left, let's say the ultra progressive left, if their fundamental value is we need to speak on behalf of the oppressed and marginalized, that those terms get thrown around all the time. People who are not genuinely oppressed or marginalized, or people who claim to be oppressed and marginalized in ways that certainly do not rise to the oppression and marginalization of other people, that takes up a lot of space. But the Palestinian people, if anyone on this earth are being oppressed and marginalized right now, it's certainly the Palestinian civilians, whether by Hamas or by Israel. And so on the left, I think it's fair that this is taking up most of the space, and specifically as it relates to pride. I don't know tell me what you think of this. And I won't, make you share your opinion on whether or not, for example, furries, as we talked about. I am, of course,
furries like yourself, yes.
Out and about furry. I think that the issue in Palestine is going to cause a fundamental change on the progressive left, where a lot of the claims of oppression by, let's say, furries, or like the kink community, or
Yeah.
I don't say gay people broadly, because that's not even, being white and gay puts you in the far right camp nowadays. So you don't even have any street cred amongst ultra progressive anymore. But like the people who say, I feel oppressed because I was misgendered at the restaurant or something like that.
Yes.
I feel like that is going to utterly lose credibility. Because when you compare it to, like, here's Palestinian children starving to death.
Yeah.
And then here's the rich white transgender person who was misgendered and who, cares too much about it. It's like,
I get what you're saying, but I think that that's not exactly what's happening. I think if that was what was happening, I think that would in some ways be, morally defensible. We could sort of quibble about it, but I think like that sort of establishment of a sort of hierarchy of priorities makes sense. Yeah, you sort of focus on human suffering where it's most manifest. What I see happening in some corners of the left, of the activist left, however, is a kind of assertion that all of these causes are sort of like interconnected, and that the Palestinian cause is just kind of like the first domino that has to fall in order to achieve all of these other ends, right? So I don't know if you saw that there was a kind of like meme going around, not like a meme, like a sort of diagram on social media, where it's just kind of like it has all of these kind of like progressive causes, and then the Palestinian cause is like right in the middle and saying, there can be no LGBT justice until there is justice in Palestine. There can be no climate justice until there's justice in Palestine. There can be no trans rights until there is justice in Palestine. And that is, I think, the kind of way that some on the activist sort of space have tried to square the circle, where we can say that all of these causes matter, but the Palestinian cause is sort of like the first among equals. And in some ways, the other sort of social justice goals are like contingent on the securing of, the liberation of the Palestinians. And to me, like, that's a very weird and tortured logic, right? Like, I think it's the sort of way of saying that like no sacrifices have to be made so long as you sort of put the Palestinian cause in the, priority number one. Right? Well, I think it's fine to sort of say that, like, the Palestinian cause should be priority number one, but don't pretend like that all of the causes are somehow interconnected to this one, situation happening overseas, because I think like that's just like not coherent. I think it is I don't mean to be sort of callous about this, but like you could imagine a scenario in which it would be possible to pursue climate justice while being completely indifferent to the plight of the Palestinians.
Yeah, of course.
That might be an immoral position, but I think it's entirely possible to do so, right? And I think it's a bit disingenuous when people act like those two goals, are somehow inseparably linked.
Well, it's interesting. I don't disagree on the logic of it, but the underlying rationale of that, it's a Martin Luther King idea that none of us are free until all of us are free. That while some people are oppressed, we're all oppressed in some sense. That's the rationale that is being drawn there, and no one was concerned about it up until now, when the Palestinian cause seems to be the most controversial in. Like, every corporation will gladly pay lip service to, of course, we're in favor of the gays, trans, furries, black people, blah, blah, whatever. Like, every oppressed group insert here, every corporation will support it. Kind of the opposite with the Palestinian one. I don't know of any corporations that have taken public stances in favor of the Palestinians. May or may not be due to the influence of the Israel lobby, as John Mearsheimer points out.
Or just Jewish Americans in general, right? Like, I mean, it's a divisive issue domestically in a way that, and, I think that, Jewish Americans are more sort of, I don't know how to sort of put it, right? It's like who is on the other side of, sort of saying we oppose or we support sort of racial equality, right? Like, nobody except for racists, and no one's going to really sort of give like hardcore racists the time of day. So if a company wants to come out and sort of say like, we respect Black rights, that's, in theory, that's an uncontroversial position, right? Like, people can sort of find fault with it in the way that it sort of perhaps manifests in practice, contemporary politics.
Agree. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of Jewish Americans take, the survival of Israel very seriously and are very, apprehensive or towards anything that seems like it's undermining the survival of Israel. So I don't know. And yeah, and it's like, it's different. Like, it cannot really sort of be marketed in a way that's even theoretically uncontroversial, I think, just because a lot of people, they see the Palestinian flag, right? And, some people view that as a symbol of a sort of a sovereign people, an oppressed people, a people that deserve liberation, people that deserve a state. And then some people see that flag as a sort of symbol of hostility to the survival of Israel, right? And you can say that's the wrong position to have, but that's a position that a lot of people feel very strongly. And I think that a company is much more wary to sort of like wade into that minefield than, flying the pride flag on their logo, which is, again, like, who really has a problem with that other than sort of people that are just triggered by LGBT folks.
That's fair. You and I have discussed endlessly our opinions on Israel-Palestine, and so I don't want to go too deep into it now, but I do want to address... Oh, first on the pride thing. As a queer yourself, you would describe yourself as queer, right? What do you think of Queers for Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, I know that this is a kind of like trendy, sort of fashionable right-wing sort of thing to beat up on, but yeah, I mean, obviously,
I'm just asking.
No, I mean, it seems
I'm a furry non-binary,
ridiculous.
So I'm like, also in the camp, I guess.
No, I mean, I guess maybe you're a queer for Palestine, so right. we can accept that. No, I mean, it's again, like it's a symptom of sort of like the idea that like all the causes are intimately linked and that there's no sort of trade-offs. Like I have heard I think there are some sort of like more honest people on the activist. I've seen some people on sort of on the activist left make the case that it's like, you support, rights of people, even if they have sort of socially regressive views, right? Like the people's sort of right to be free should not be contingent on, every opinion that they hold, right? Like if somebody is homophobic, right, I would still think that they don't deserve to be sort of shot in the street, right? So, and I think that like well, I know, right? Exactly, right? So it's like, I think that that's the more defensible position to take, is to sort of say, like, if someone on the activist left wants to sort of say, like, I support sort of the liberation of Palestine, even though there are people on the Palestinian side whose, social views might be to the right of mine, or might be controversial or reactionary, or, in need of, changing, right? Like, but to pretend that, like, that there is no contradiction at all, I think is intellectually dishonest. And that's why it when you say sort of things like Queers for Palestine and that, or Queers for Hamas or whatever, right? Like that sort of thing does, I think.
Queers for Palestine, you could at least, get in theory, because Palestine is different from Hamas. And I think not making that distinction is as dangerous as not distinguishing between like Jews and the Israeli far-right, ultra-right Zionists, or the Zionist extremists. To your point, it's also like the left is generally pro-working class. And from a social point of view, I believe people in, working class or lower class tend to have more regressive views on things like gay marriage or something like that. So, I would say it's in keeping with, you still have to show grace to people despite their not necessarily having the most progressive views on things.
That's I mean, it's interesting. Like that's a good point that you made, like when it comes to sort of like in domestic American politics, right? And I think that this is a sort of symptom of the negative sort of polarization, right? Where it's like we're increasingly are trying to make everybody pass a sort of ideological litmus test before we determine whether or not they're deserving of rights or not, or that you sort of have the idea that like government should be sort of vindictive and act in a vindictive way on the basis of your ideological beliefs. This is why, like when we're talking about like, oh, the populist right is sort of getting more anti-corporate and stuff. It's like, are they getting anti-corporate because, they have realized that there's like structural inequalities in the American economy, or are they getting sort of anti-corporate just because they've noticed that some corporations have, quote unquote, woke social policy agenda, punish them and raise their taxes or regulations or whatever, right? It's the same kind of thing, and I think it's that's heady.
I love how you put air quotes on woke as if it's not totally a real thing, but that's fine. I want to show you this. It's related.
Okay.
Netanyahu is going to address a joint session of U.S. Congress.